Welcome to Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. Our team's goal is to present science-based information about gardening and all things nature in New York's Hudson Valley. Hosts Jean and Tim, along with team members
Teresa, Linda, and Annie,
are master gardener volunteers for New York's Columbia and Greene counties. So if you're interested in gardening or nature, or nuggets of information about what's happening outside your door, settle in. Enjoy the conversation. Whatever the season, we have something to say.
Hi, I'm Jean Thomas. Welcome to episode 1 of Patch to Plate, where Annie Scibienski, team member supreme and cook par excellence, follows the seasons in the garden. This episode covers the autumn harvest, root vegetables, squash, potatoes, and sweet potatoes. I'm going to go sit in the kitchen and wait for the recipes. Hi, and welcome. If you've been listening to the podcast episodes, you've heard from Teresa Golden talking about the veggie patch. Now we're moving from patch to plate. Today we're going to talk about highlighting ingredients from the home garden or farmer's market or even the grocery store and using them in your home kitchen. I'm Annie Scibienski, a master gardener volunteer with Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene counties. Today we're going to focus on good storage winter vegetables, familiar favorites, carrots and beets, particularly golden beets. These vegetables are really easy to grow. You can put them in the ground as soon as it can be worked, usually around April 15th. They tolerate light frost, so they're good veggies to get in the ground early, and they're slow to germinate, so you can put in a row of radishes along with the beets and carrots, and they'll grow, break soil crust, and get the ground really ready for when the carrots and beets are ready to sprout. These root vegetables you can hear more about in Podcast 38, Teresa's Veggie Patch segment, and growing guides are on our website. This time of year, carrots and beets are both readily available in our area. Because they're so easy to peel and chop and shred and roast and puree and freeze, they can be easily incorporated into a lot of recipes, and we've included in the show notes information on how to select and store and cook them, as well as some nutritional information. I'll start with the carrots. Carrots love butter, ginger, lemon, maple syrup, orange juice, and sugar, and they're also pretty fond of cinnamon, dill, mint, and salt. So when you're looking for a recipe, say, for your carrots, look to see if these other ingredients are also part of the recipe, because if so, it may be a well-thought-out recipe and increase the chances that you'll have a successful outcome. Let's talk about maple glazed carrots. There's a full recipe at the link in our show notes, but let's talk about the general approach. Peel the carrots and cut them into chunks of about 1.5 inches. We're going to roast them until tender in olive oil. I use olive oil cooking spray. It's a little bit lighter. So preheat the oven to 400. At about 400 Fahrenheit, these are going to take 20 minutes to roast, roughly. If you're using your oven for other items, you can roast these carrots at 375 to 425. Any place in that range will do it. The cooking time will vary, obviously, depending on how hot the oven is. So put them in, keep an eye on them. While they're roasting, whisk together a glaze of maple syrup, balsamic vinegar, and a little Dijon mustard. When tender, pull the pan out of the oven, pour the glaze on it, and stir around. You want to coat the veggies. Put them back in the oven for another 3 to 5 minutes. This is going to make a great side dish with almost any main dish. Root vegetables and winter squashes have a couple things in common. They're good storing vegetables. They're readily available in our area, and they love roasting, which intensifies their natural sweetness. Because they share these characteristics, they're easy to swap for each other. If you've got a butternut squash recipe, you could use sweet potatoes or carrots instead. You can use any of the above as a substitution for pumpkin, say. Feel free, if you have a recipe you like, to substitute one for the other. You may come up with a new family favorite. Ready for dessert? We're going to have hidden beet pound cake. It's hard to detect the beets once the cake's actually made. The approach is to take a basic cake recipe that includes flour, baking soda, salt, eggs, and oil and replace the usual milk or water with pureed beets. Your setup for success includes preheating the oven, getting all the ingredients out of the cupboard so you make sure you have them, preparing a 9x5 loaf pan. Details are in the recipe and that link is in our show notes. But it's a simple approach. Mix all your dry ingredients together in one bowl, your wet ingredients together in another. Add dry to wet until just combined. You don't want to overmix it because mixing creates gluten and that makes the final cake tough. Once you have it all together, I want you to do a batter check. By this I mean just tip the bowl slightly toward you. The batter should also move toward you. If it doesn't, if it stays where it is, add a tablespoon, remix. If necessary, a second tablespoon of water and remix. When you tip the bowl, you want the batter to flow toward you. You want the consistency of a pancake batter, for example, something that you can ladle. Once your batter passes its check, get it into the pan, pour it in, and then use a spatula to scrape it in. Put the pan in your preheated oven. Because of the high moisture content in this recipe, it's going to take a while to bake. So set the timer for 65 minutes and check it then. It may take as long as 75. When it's done, insert a toothpick in the center of the loaf pan and it should come out cleanly. Let the cake cool completely before slicing. See the beets? No, they're hidden. For these and more nutritious recipes, head to the nutrition page at our Cornell website. Enjoy. That's it for this edition of From Patch to Plate. I'm Annie Scibienski. As a tie-in to the recurring segment from the Veggie Patch, today we'll continue our Patch to Plate talks about using ingredients from your vegetable garden or farmer's market. I'm Annie Scibienski, a Master Gardener volunteer with Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties. First on my mind today is winter squash. In addition to the familiar butternut and acorn winter squash, there are a staggering variety of different fruit shapes, sizes, and colors. Winter squash is fairly easy to grow, but it can take up a lot of space in the garden. If your space is tight, there are bush varieties. Listen in on episode 5 to hear from Gene Thomas about how to read seed catalogs, and that'll help you pick a variety that'll work for you. There's also more on growing winter squash in Teresa Golden's Veggie Patch segment included in episode 36. Growing guides for these and many, many other veggies are available from a link in the show notes on the website. Winter squash, particularly butternut, and closely related varieties like honey nut, have real flavor affinities with sage, onion, and salt, and they pair well with brown butter, Parmesan, nutmeg, cinnamon, sugar, thyme, and acids like lemon and lime, vinegar, wine. Look for recipes that include combinations of these ingredients, and when you see them highlighted, you increase your odds on creating a tasty dish. Preheat your oven to 375 to 400, somewhere in that range is ideal, and roast your butternut. I offer a range here, recognizing you might be using your oven for another purpose, and the squash won't suffer from more or less heat, though the roasting time will of course vary. To prep, you can cut the butternut in half lengthwise, spray it with oil or rub it with oil, season it with salt and pepper, or, as I do, you can pierce it several times to create steam vents and roast it whole. Either way, roast it on a sheet pan until the squash is soft. Pierce it with a knife to test doneness. It should slide easily and deeply into the squash. While the squash is roasting, sauté onion, garlic, and a little sage in your soup pot. You can do this in olive oil or pan spray. When the squash is roasted nice and soft, remove the skin, discard the seeds and stringy pulp. Puree the squash with the sautéed onion mixture and add your vegetable stock. You can puree this in the soup pot using an immersion blender or in a standard blender when the soup is cool enough to handle. Then you, of course, have to reheat it. Season to taste with salt and pepper. Consider adding a dash of cinnamon or cayenne or chili oil or a squeeze of lime. If you don't add any of that to the pot, grate a little Parmesan on top of each bowl when you serve it. Next, celebrate soup weather. That's it. The next recipe we want to talk about uses the humble cabbage. Roasting cabbage, just like roasting broccoli or Brussels sprouts, helps to bring out the natural sweetness and nuttiness, and it also gives you nice textures and color contrasts. To prepare this recipe, you'll need a really hot oven, so set it to preheat at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Cut the cabbage into 6 or 8 wedges. Place the wedges on a baking sheet in a single layer. Drizzle or spray with olive oil and sprinkle lightly with salt and pepper. Flip the wedges. Repeat the oil, salt, and pepper. Get them into the hot oven and roast for 10 minutes until lightly browned. Then take them out, flip them, and roast for an additional 10 minutes or so until deeply brown and tender. That's the basic recipe, though I like to serve it with walnuts. So during the last 3 minutes of roasting, I add a handful, maybe half a cup of walnuts to the sheet pan and allow them to toast too. When I bring them out of the oven, I give them a rough chop and sprinkle them on the warm cabbage for added texture and nutty goodness. Other great accompaniments for this cabbage include toasted seeds like caraway or pumpkin, or a drizzle of apple cider vinegar, or honey mustard vinaigrette. There are more butternut squash soup recipes as well as cabbage-centric recipes for sauerkraut and Hungarian red cabbage in our Master Gardener's Cookbook. You can call the office if you'd like to buy a copy. For other recipes, please go to the nutrition page at our Cornell website. Enjoy. That's it for this edition of From Patch to Plate. I'm Annie Scibienski. Welcome. We're moving today from the veggie patch to From Patch to Plate. We're going to talk about using home or locally grown vegetables and getting them on the table. I'm Annie Scibienski, a Master Gardener volunteer with Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene counties. Today I'm thinking about winter vegetables, those readily at hand throughout the winter. I'm thinking sweet potatoes, onions, and dry beans. I've grown sweet potatoes for sure, but I've never grown beans for trying. I want to assure you that's never slowed down my prep or my enjoyment. There's lots of growing guides on our website for these and other vegetables. And I want to mention that both the sweet potatoes and the onions are grown underground. So though you can't really see what's happening, they're both good to grow in our environment. For more on growing vegetables that you can't see, check out Teresa's Veggie Patch segment in episode 38. Sweet potatoes and onions have some natural flavor affiliates. Both go great with garlic, chili peppers, nutmeg, and dairy. And when I say dairy, be it butter, creams, cheeses, both meld very, very well with these two vegetables. Even if you think about how many times you've seen a recipe that starts with saute an onion in a little butter, it's tried and true. Dried beans, when cooked, generally pair well with onions and garlic and chili peppers and, again, cheeses and spices like cumin and savory and thyme. So when you see several of these vegetables and flavor enhancers in the same recipe, you're probably looking at a recipe that's going to produce a winning result. Today I want to talk about a preparation that you can use in a lot of different ways. So let's just get into the how we do it. Preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit and scrub a few sweet potatoes we're going to bake. We're only going to use one for this recipe, but I'll share ways to use another potato or two in a bit. So peel the baked potato, mash half, dice the other half. Add a diced red onion, jalapeno, and a colorful but please not green bell pepper, and a thumb-sized clove of garlic, finely minced. Add 2 cups of black beans. Toss it together with apple cider vinegar and some fresh lime juice. Season this with salt, pepper, cumin, thyme, and some chopped fresh herbs. The herb mix ideally should have a lot of parsley, at least half. Mix it all together and then put it in the refrigerator and chill it for several hours. To enjoy this cold, think salsa and tortilla chips. Think about putting a bowl of it on the table with other salad bar options and let people incorporate it as they see fit. Or you could even pass it as a cold side salad. I love this mixture hot. I heat it up. I add freshly cooked pasta to the sweet potatoes and beans, toss it, garnish it with a little more parsley, and that's a meal for me. You could also heat it, scoop it up with a slotted spoon, and lift a good scoop into a warm tortilla. Ladle the liquid into a bowl for dipping. You could add the recipe to a large frying pan or wok and heat thoroughly with cooked rice, and I will say brown rice works really well with these flavors. If by any chance there's leftovers, heat them up and top them with fried eggs for breakfast tomorrow morning. Enjoy. So if you bake that extra sweet potato, get ready to make scones. There's no exotic ingredients involved. This is just pantry basics. Butter, sugar, salt, and an egg. Baking powder, flour, cinnamon, and some chocolate chips or chunks, in addition to the mashed sweet potato. There's recipes, links, and quantities of each ingredient and directions in the show notes. These combined equal yummy scones. The scones bake in a hot oven, so start by preheating it to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Put parchment or a silicone pad on a sheet pan, and then go through the usual steps of starting to bake. Beat your butter, sugar, and salt. Scramble in an egg. Fold in the mashed sweet potato and stir it until smooth. Mix in the baking powder and cinnamon, add in your flour, and mix until you have a kneadable dough. If it's a little wet, you can always add a tablespoon at a time of flour until you get the right consistency. Then knead in the chocolate chips and dump it out onto the counter on a lightly floured surface. Knead it 3 or 4 times and shape it into a rectangle. Roll it out to about 3/4 of an inch thickness. Use a cookie cutter roughly 2 inches in diameter and cut the dough into rounds. You can re-roll the scraps and recut them. Place each round on your prepared baking sheet. The 2-inch rounds will bake to a pretty golden brown in about 15 minutes. While it's baking, let me tell you this. It's not important that you use a 2-inch cookie cutter. You could use a glass. You could use a knife and cut it into squares. Or you can use an ice cream scoop to scoop up uniform portions. The blue ice cream scoop, by the way, measures a 1/4 cup. The important thing is that the scones are of uniform size, so they all bake at the same rate. Enjoy these. Hot, cold, butter, or a little cream cheese. If you want more sweet potato recipes, Mary Ann Giacchino has a recipe for Aunt Hildy's candied sweet potatoes in our Master Gardener cookbook. You can call the office if you'd like to buy a copy. For other recipes, please go to the nutrition page on our Cornell website. Enjoy. That's it for this edition of From Patch to Plate. I'm Annie Scibienski. Hi, and welcome to Patch to Plate. I'm Annie Scibienski, a Master Gardener Volunteer with Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties. This is a recurrent segment of Nature Calls where I talk about using the produce from your garden or my garden or from a farm store or grocery. Today, let's tater talk. Potatoes sometimes get a bad rap, especially among those who are very carb conscious. I want to remind people that serving size matters. Half a cup of cooked potatoes or 1 cupped handful of potatoes is a serving. A serving is really about the size of 1 medium potato. And that 1/2 a medium potato is worth it nutritionally. Let's look inside. It's packed with vitamin C. It adds B6, potassium, and niacin to your diet. The niacin is a type of B vitamin that helps make energy in your body. So maybe take a walk rather than a nap. Don't be a couch potato. Another reason that potatoes sometimes get a bad rap is their association with the delicious dairy products frequently used in conjunction with them. Butter, milk, cream, and of course cheese. All of these add richness to a potato dish, but there are plenty of other recipes that are lighter and don't have the nutritional downside that those dairy products might. Let's start with a simple baked potato. If you're growing your own, the Kennebec variety is a good starchy potato choice. If you're buying potatoes to bake, russets are close to Kennebec, and you'll most likely find them in every grocery store in the area. If you've grown or bought Yukon Gold, you can certainly bake that, although you won't get the crisp exterior or the fluffy interior that you will get from the starchy variety. Yukon Gold's a good all-around potato if you're only going to keep one in your dark, cool pantry. To bake it, get the oven hot, preheat it to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Of course, if you're using the oven for other things, any place in the 375 to 425 range will bake your potato. It will just impact the baking time. Scrub the skin of the potato and poke a few slits in it along the length, and then spray and rub the potato with oil if you're looking for a crispier skin. Put the potato directly on the oven rack, and if you're afraid it drips, put your baking sheet on the rack below it. This method gives the heat room to circulate, the skin will get crisp and stay crisp, and it protects your oven from any drips. The caution I'd give you is don't wrap the potatoes in foil. When you do this, they'll steam rather than bake, and steaming doesn't result in the crumbly, fluffy texture of a baked potato that you're really looking for. In fact, don't microwave them for the same reason. So the potatoes are in the oven, and you can start checking at about 40 minutes to an hour for them to bake, and the time will vary depending on the size of the potato and the actual temp that you have the oven set at. Once it's baked through, you'll know because a sharp knife or a skewer that you press against it should pierce the skin and flesh easily with very little resistance. To serve your newly baked potato, cut a slit lengthwise about halfway through the potato, push in from the long ends toward the middle to open up the potato and expose the flesh. Use a fork to fluff it up. Add salt and pepper. Add classics like butter, sour cream, chives. Some alternatives are plain yogurt or cottage cheese or a nice garlic aioli. You could try some hot sauce, barbecue sauce, gravy, serving a chili, pesto, or any salsa that you happen to have on hand. Of course, your grated cheese of choice will also be delicious. For variety, you could slit the potato before baking, do it along the length of the potato, and put in a bay leaf or a sprig of rosemary or thyme or crushed sage leaf into the slit. Drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil and let those flavors bake right into the potato. Bake it the same way. Just remove the leaves or sprigs before serving. You'll be in for a really good surprise. Moving from starchy to waxy potatoes, good varieties to grow in our area are German butterball, as well as Adirondack red or blue, and French fingerlings too. The ever-popular all-purpose Yukon Gold does well. These can all be boiled, steamed, smashed, or mashed, leaving the skins on. I like to cook up a pot of smaller potatoes, leave the skins on, and have them in the fridge and ready to slice or smash and add to meals all week long. Just like adding herbs while baking potatoes can seriously enhance your spud experience, additions to these waxier varieties can both elevate the taste of the potato themselves as well as be used to tie together the potato with other food on the dish. What I'm thinking here is that if you're looking over your main course entree recipe and you see some herbs or oils or sauces that are used sparingly in the preparation, pick one or two and then mix a small amount into your potatoes while you're cooking them. Or alternatively, mash them into your potatoes once they're cooked. You could toss the still warm new potatoes with a bit of miso or toasted sesame oil and some scallions. That would be a lovely side. These potatoes, so plainly prepared, seasoned simply with other herbs and spices, make a great addition to almost any entree. I like the grilled or boiled potatoes simply dipped or drizzled or tossed in a flavor that goes with the meal I'm having. So it might be ranch dressing, it might be chutney, it might be a hot pan of caramelized onions. We put some links in the show notes to hearty mashed potato recipes and one for seasoned roasted potatoes too. In the notes, you'll find growing guides for several varieties of potatoes and, of course, loads of other vegetables that have proven to grow well in our area. You can get your potatoes started after the last chance of hard frost, say mid-May. Remember to listen to Teresa's Veggie Patch segments for a wide range of gardening advice, tips, and tricks. And to avoid trouble, also check out the Pests and Pathogens episode. If you're still yearning for more potato recipes, I encourage you to check out both hot and cold leek and potato soups in our Master Gardener's Cookbook. You can call the office if you'd like to buy a copy. For other recipes, please go to the nutrition page on our Cornell website. Enjoy! That's it for this edition of From Patch to Plate. I'm Annie Scibienski. Stay tuned for episode 2.
That concludes another episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. We would like to thank
Sandra Powers
and Devin Connolly from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties for production support. And a special thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. You can find links to any of the topics mentioned in this episode at our website at ccecolumbiagreen.org. Comments and suggestions for future topics may be directed to us at columbiagreenmgb@cornell.edu or on the CCE Master Gardener Volunteers of Columbia and Greene Counties Facebook page. For more information about Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties, visit our website at ccecolumbiagreen.org or visit us in Hudson or in Acre. Cornell Cooperative Extension provides equal programming and employment opportunities